With adjustment to vision loss, I talk a lot with clients about this is your success is going to be highly dependent on becoming an expert on yourself. So you first, clarifying what is it I need, which
Mm.
is much easier said than done, right? When you're dealing in crisis, dealing with new, sensory challenges, and your life is really, changed suddenly, or slowly over time with a progressive condition. How am I supposed to know what I need is what I hear from a lot of clients. They're like, well, I
Right.
wouldn't even know where to begin. And that's so, understandable, right? That's of course that makes sense.
You're listening to Inside Out, a podcast about living well with low vision. Maybe you're feeling confused, scared, isolated, or disheartened about a recent vision loss diagnosis. Or maybe you've been managing your vision loss for a while and now you want to hear from others about how to continue growing and thriving. Inside Out is your supportive space to find healthy and impactful tools to build and maintain a truly rich and gratifying life with low or no vision. I'm Matthew Reeves. I'm a legally blind psychotherapist and rehabilitation counselor. I specialize in helping people adjust to disability through my practice, Integral Mental Health Services in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm really glad you're listening. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and let others in the low vision community know about the podcast so the word can spread to those who might find it helpful. And now, on with today's discussion. One of the most daunting challenges facing someone living with low vision is building a fulfilling career. In the US, we have a system called Vocational Rehabilitation, or VR, that exists to help blind and low vision adults obtain the skills and opportunities they need to reach towards that goal. Today, we'll hear from Janice Barrocas, who's worked extensively both inside the VR system and as an advocate for the clients they serve. We'll learn her most valuable insights on navigating the VR system to decrease frustration and maximize results. All right. Thank you, Janice, for joining us. I've asked you to come here to talk about one of the most challenging topics in the world of low vision, and that is career management, and specifically how people are using the vocational rehabilitation system, which is kind of a mouthful into itself. And a lot of people uh, are familiar with it, and a lot of people aren't familiar with it, but you've got a lot of experience with it. So I was hoping you could spend some time helping people understand it and understand how to utilize it the best they can, and what to expect through that experience. So thank you for joining us. I think this is could be very useful for a lot of people. So thanks for being here.
Sure, me too.
Yeah. Why don't you get us started by giving us a bit of a picture of what you do professionally and how it connects to the vocation rehabilitation system and what your experience is with that.
Sure. So I am a licensed professional counselor in Georgia, which means I'm state licensed to provide mental health services. But the credential that's probably more relevant here is my national certification as a rehabilitation counselor. So vocational rehab state agencies historically have liked to employ people with that credential because it's a type of mental health background that really focuses on acquired disability, and there's a lot there, right?
Mhm.
That's a very big issue. And so helping people who've been um, living their lives one way and now have a really big adjustment to make and who are mid career takes a holistic skill set.
Yeah, and what is your experience with the VR system specifically?
So currently, I am a contract provider of something called personal adjustment counseling to blindness. But right after I came out of graduate school, I was on a long term care training grant in graduate school at Mercer that was designed to create more qualified counselors in vocational rehab. And so, one of the couple things we all agreed to do as part of getting that scholarship, one was do a 600-hour internship at Vocational Rehabilitation. And so that happened while we were still in grad school, and then to work for 2 years in that same system when we came out.
So you've got quite a lot of experience on the inside, and it sounds like working with people using it as clients or customers of that system.
I should say, yeah. And it goes back even further than that.
How so?
In in the 90s, I worked for someone who I helped go through. I was on the client advocacy side. I was working for a quadriplegic single mom who was trying to go back to work. And so I was sort of, doing it with her. We were tag teaming. What's it like to be a client? What do you ask for? And so I think having had the consumer experience, um, although that wasn't about vision loss, it was very enlightening.
Can you talk about, or maybe go into a little more depth about um, the purpose of the VR system and the structure of it, and kind of paint a picture for us, if you can, about kind of what people will be engaging with, why it exists, maybe if you know it, the history of it, kind of set some context for us so we can understand it a little better.
So in the US, IDEA is the big disability advocacy law that people are familiar with. It's for kids in K through 12 school systems.
Hmm.
And so if you're a child coming through the system, you have a right to have your education essentially tailored and some accommodations made for whatever disability you might have. And that, right, all stops when you come out of the K through 12 system.
Mm.
So for people who have midlife vision loss, this wasn't ever an experience they had. They don't even know there is such a thing. But it's interesting. I think the reason that the vocational rehabilitation system, as we know it, exists in the US Department of Education is because policymakers kind of saw it as an extension of what happened with IDEA for kids coming up through, K through 12 schools. So it's not, in my opinion, not the greatest place to house a program that's really about labor and employment, because educators of kids, right, may not know what they don't know. But that's currently where it lives.
Okay. And its purpose is, it sounds like it's
Employment,
employment specifically. It is not, it doesn't exist to address all the needs of people with disabilities. It's
correct.
specifically about employment challenges and finding employment. What is its goal in the world of employment specifically?
To help people prepare for, obtain, retain, and maintain employment. And so any service that the taxpayer dollars that come through the vocational rehab system funds are supposed to go toward directly one of those goals. They're supposed to be reasonably appropriate, necessary to either help you prepare for the job, obtain the job, retain the job, um, or if you're already employed when you experience some sort of vision loss and you come to them, it's considered what's called a job save. So maintaining your employment. But the idea is not, why this comes up a lot with the clients that we serve is because there's a lot of independent skills you need that are kind of the 0 to 1, the preparatory stages to being ready to be an effective job searcher.
Give me an
And
example of that. What do you mean?
uh, cooking without looking, how to get the technology talking to you, how to use the iPhone or whatever kind of a device you might be on, smartphone, to, right, read your text messages to you, read your emails to you, um, navigating transportation as a non driver, um, handling your laundry, getting the clothes clean. Do they match? Am I going to be wearing something that's, I'm proud of to present in a job interview? Like, do I know how to make lunch to take it to work when I get the job? All of those things are not really job readiness skills in the hard sense, but you aren't ever going to be job ready if you don't gain them either. So
So they're fair game for the VR system to help obtain those skills if a person doesn't have them.
they absolutely are. It's also a very, compared with the other types of disabilities, I think that they serve at times where it's a 3 month window. We help people, learn these specific things to tasks and how to dress for work and some soft skills and how to do the job application online. and maybe they have a 6 month, 9 month case with VR. They get a job, right? They're employed. Case closed after 90 days. That's really not the experience of folks with vision loss who
Hmm.
need a lot of um, consistency, I should say. They don't just need those skills; they need consistency in the training to obtain them if they're really going to have right an experience where they can retain it and benefit.
And since this is a podcast specifically about vision loss, but we're talking about a program that's designed for disability in a broader sense, can you talk about what makes VR either tailored for vision loss or maybe in certain ways that it's not specifically tailored for vision loss and the ways that it hits it and ways that it misses it?
So the first thing to say there is not all 50 states and or territories and tribal lands have the same model for delivering vocational rehabilitation services. There's a lot of choices that the state gets to make about how we will deliver this, what model to use. And about half the states use what, it's a two-part system. They have a commission for the blind. They have some sort of infrastructure that is strictly serving visually impaired clients with vocational rehab needs. And then they have, right, sort of what general population, everything else. Um, Georgia operates what's called a combined system. So we don't have specialty, organization, deep knowledge, and a commission of the blind or a commission for the blind. What we have is sort of a one stop shop. And of course, we know one size does not fit all. So there's challenges with it.
So you're referencing something that I wanted to ask about. We've referred to this as both a federal program out of the Department of Education and also a state program. What's the relationship there? How do we understand that?
Federal government makes grants to the states. I don't know if this is currently true based on today's politics, but I will say, at least historically, it was an 80-20 funding split. So the federal government provided 80 cents on the dollar. The state put up the other 20 cents to draw those funds down. And so it was a federal state program, but the lion's share of the dollars were coming from Washington, D.C.
Okay, and it exists in all states and territories and tribal lands. It exists in, if you're an American, you have access to the VR system.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Um, what has been, I'm going to ask the $1 million question. What has been your experience in terms of satisfaction and success rate? What can people expect when they first engage with the VR system saying, "Hey, I need some help in this area." What is the outcome?
Like vision loss, it's very individualized, right? It's unique to
Okay.
each person. Um, Remember those commercials that said subject to availability,
Yeah.
right? Ginsu knives, they're great. They'll cut a tin can or a peach.
Or
But
a
they're
shoe.
only right, or whatever it is you want to cut, but only available, right? Subject to availability. And I think that's perhaps the piece that is um, right in the fine print or unspoken when it comes to vocational rehabilitation for folks who are blind or low vision, at least in the areas that I serve. There are huge shortages of the providers, the vision rehabilitation professionals that do this hands on training and education with adults. And so you can have a beautiful infrastructure and system. But ultimately, a lot boils down to whether, you've got, right, elbow grease, the manpower, boots on the ground to go to one of Georgia's 159 counties and bring that education, local to somebody who needs it. And so there's a lot of holes in the net, if you will.
Hmm. Gotcha. How, what are the approaches or navigation skills that are useful for people with low vision? And I know your experience is in Georgia, so I hope this can apply more broadly. But what are the approaches that somebody can take to maximize their outcomes, to maximize the chances that those resources will be allocated and allocated in a way that's truly helpful for them?
With adjustment to vision loss, I talk a lot with clients about this is your success is going to be highly dependent on becoming an expert on yourself. So you first, clarifying what is it I need, which
Mm.
is much easier said than done, right? When you're dealing in crisis, dealing with new, sensory challenges, and your life is really, changed suddenly, or slowly over time with a progressive condition. How am I supposed to know what I need? Is what I hear from a lot of clients. They're like, well, I
Right.
wouldn't even know where to begin, and that's so understandable, right? That's of course that makes sense. But self advocacy and persistence are probably the short answer to your question. And then there's better and worse ways, right, to do those things. And I think frustration with not having your needs met and not feeling seen and heard makes effective self advocacy particularly challenging for a lot of folks
Mm.
because you're feeling right like you're getting no response. You're not, or you're getting responses that don't make sense. You called and said, "Hi, I'm blind and I need help applying," and they sent you a pile of paper in the mail and asked you to fill out forms. And it's just maddening, right? The client's like, "What am I supposed to do with these?" I
Yeah,
called for help.
that's one of those if you don't laugh, you cry moments.
Exactly. It's just, and so not feeling understood, right, in that moment. And very often, again, kind of going back to whoever's answering the phone or in charge of sending out this paperwork may or may not have any orientation to the type of client they're supposed to be helping and accommodating here.
So, given that situation, that's a really good specific example. How would you guide one of your clients through how to respond to such a maddening situation? How do you turn that really frustrating moment into something that where you can move it forward and start to achieve your goals?
Processing the frustration, first and foremost, offline from the advocacy conversation.
Yeah.
Best practice there. And if that's possible, some folks do not have anyone safe to process this with. So let me just say that again is easier said than done. But I'm a big fan of asking for someone's email address and making your request in writing, in large part because having been a vocational rehab counselor, I know they are tremendously overburdened.
Mhm.
And they may get, however many phone messages and voicemails a day, or text messages, right? And that stuff, if it's not on the top of the pile, it's gone, it vanishes. And so I often will hear from someone, I've called 5 times, I'm getting nothing. And I'm like, okay, so do you know the name of the person you're trying to reach? All right, let's take that and turn it into their email address. We know how the STEM works for this state agency. They're all pretty much the same, first name dot last name,
Right.
at the end, and let's craft an email. And depending on where they are, with their learning technology skills, just that sounds really intimidating, right? So I recognize that's not a small thing to do. And we often talk through, okay, what are the choices? So you're not a computer user at this point. Okay, well, what else might work? Who can we recruit? Can we get your phone talking to you, listening to you, chat GPT, whatever tools we can round up, family member, an 18-year-old expert, whatever. Um, and let's craft this language. And very often, what to say is a big barrier because this feels intimidating talking to a big state agency. And so I do a lot of helping people, like, it doesn't have to be beautiful, just greeting, right? Name the 3 things you need, make it clear you're really eager to get moving with your, vocational rehabilitation goals. And ask them, make a ask at the end, something with a question mark so that you're inviting a response, right? Be sure you include your phone number and a phone number where you will know if they called. That's another barrier, right? Very often folks can't see the icon on their flat screen phone anymore, so they have voicemails stacking up. They don't even know they're there. So
Oh, yeah.
have
If the
somebody
phone
help you
rings
check
when
your
they're
phone.
Yeah, if the phone
Right,
rings
right.
when you're not feeling the vibration, you'll never
You won't
know.
know.
Yeah.
Bingo. So we do a lot of talking about, now that we've made this request, have somebody help you check your voicemails, right? If that's something you're struggling with, every day or two, right? Treat this like a job. You've asked for a response. Let's monitor, if it hasn't come in 5, 7 days, like let's resend an email. Not an ugly one, just a very polite and, persistent one that says, following up on my email from last week. right? And just keep beating that drum. And I think people get discouraged because this is like they're in crisis and they want help yesterday. What do you mean I'm supposed to send an email a week and hope that somebody answers? But the truth is this is a professional, right, relationship you're trying to establish. So it may be slow.
Yeah. And in the midst of crisis, it's almost like inviting another crisis. Like
Yeah,
it's a
it is.
crisis in as a response to a crisis. And it's often you're trying to use the very skills you're asking for training on,
Bingo.
like, which is, I think the word you use, maddening, is incredibly appropriate, given that sort of feedback loop of despair that can start to show up in cycles like that. So I really appreciate how you were talking about the importance of processing that frustration, because that's a really valid emotion. It's an incredibly important thing to say, yeah, I'm not going crazy. This truly is maddening, and it's not my fault. I'm doing everything I can, and these are the people who are supposed to be helping me, and then they are under resourced. And I think that's an important topic. Full disclosure, I've been a client of vocational rehabilitation, so I've felt what you're talking about, and it is easy. I'm sure you know, you've been on both sides of it. It's easy to find yourself saying that the frustration is directed at the people who work at VR. And I know for sure that they have really good intention and they're under resourced. Almost always is that's the case. Can you speak to kind of what it's like to be working within that system? It might help us have more empathy and help us navigate the system better if we can understand it from the other side.
My biggest takeaway on all of it, no matter where, you're coming into the system or which side of the desk you're on, is trying to give people grace and recognize that they don't know what they don't know, right? So very often it's just do the next right thing is all you can do as the
Yeah.
person with an exceedingly large caseload and only 40 hours in your week, and you know um, and the ability to help everybody as their needs pop up is just not there, right? There has to be a queue, there has to be a line, and the idea that I'm getting in a line when I'm having a crisis is not what any client wants to hear. On the other hand, I do think being able to understand, and you said something really important, not take it personally when this right isn't when the door's not swinging open right away,
Yeah.
what the first time you knock or the second time or the third. And it's especially if it is a trauma trigger for people, right? This idea, I'm going to just shut down, never mind, screw it, I feel safer, not even engaging in this, because asking for help is hard. And that's essentially what this is. And so asking for help, getting to the point where you're able and willing and need to do that, and then having silence, on the other end is just too much for some people. But the truth is there's magic words you can say that help it along. And so
Oh,
I've
tell
learned
us the
I've learned
magic
some of
words.
those.
What are the magic words?
I think saying I'm eager to move my case forward, right? I am ready, right? Or is something that doesn't nobody, points out that a lot of people are coming into the system in crisis and they are not ready yet, right? And they're not for example, they're dealing with pressing medical issues. They've still got, they're juggling 3 and 4 doctor's appointments a week, right? They may have figured out how to do the application, and that's a huge feat. So God bless anybody who got through the eligibility gauntlet. But the truth is, a lot of counselors have a mix of people on their caseload who are on, somewhere on the continuum of readiness. Some are ready, stat right this second,
Right.
and some are 6, 8 months from being ready. And so the counselor doesn't know which one's which unless you start, to put your hand up and say, give them additional information to help them know, if you prioritize me, right, this, something's going to happen in the next 2 months. Like, I'm ready to start these appointments, right? I'm ready to show up at this training. I'm focused, right? I'm not, focused on my caregiving for my mother or my, child, right, is in crisis. People's lives are busy and sometimes they don't realize I called VR and I summoned the cavalry and they came. And then, right, it's not a good look to be too preoccupied with all of your other, family caregiving or your own medical. You got to realize that that does not, you know, project job readiness, right? Employment readiness.
And I imagine, and I have not been on the other side of it, but I imagine that for when you're working within that system and you're a counselor trying to help a huge caseload, there's going to be a natural human tendency to put the resources where you can see movement. Like you're going to float your clients to the top of the list if they are expressing readiness and eagerness, and you can see that you're not just spinning your wheels. So I can see why I'm
Mm.
eager is a magic word that could really make a difference.
And you want to do the most good for the most people.
Right, right.
So putting 15 hours worth of effort into somebody who's 8 or 9 months from being able to attend the training that you're educating them about, asking them to select, filling out paperwork for, paperwork process just to get one service started as a counselor is like a, 8, 10 step thing. And so if I'm doing all of that, and then at the end of it, and I learned this as a little counselor, you
Mm.
do all of that, and then somebody says, oh, but I'm going to be out of town for the next 6 months.
Mm.
We're like, really? Oh,
Like
you could
all,
have mentioned that
yeah.
at the beginning.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So would you say that's also kind of maybe not a magic word, but an important thing to bear in mind is transparency about what you are ready and able to do and what you are not. In other words, you're not shooting yourself in the foot to say, these are the things I can't do. The counselor would rather hear that than not know that.
I think you're building trust, right? You
Mm.
want your counselor to be able to trust you. You want to be able to trust your counselor. That's a two-way street. It goes back to, self knowledge is becoming an expert on your own strengths and abilities and needs and recognizing I don't have the ability to use the stuff that are lining up for me in the next 6 months. I won't even be home to receive the equipment. Um, right? That's important.
Yeah,
And telling somebody, being honest, I think builds, the connection and honesty it takes to have a good working relationship with that counselor.
that's great. Great advice. Are there any other magic words we should know about?
Well, obviously, I want to work, right? I mean, I think that one of the things that was very common early, dealing with people early in their vision loss journey as a vocational rehab counselor, was people had no idea what they didn't think they could work.
Mm.
They didn't know yet what was possible. And so sometimes, getting out the words, I want to work, when you question have self doubt there about what can I do now, right? That my vision's changed. That's tricky. I mean, that's really tricky because sometimes people don't feel it yet. And I think recognizing it's a journey, right? And there will be a lot of exploration and a lot of skills and learning to be a confident, visually impaired person. Presenting yourself in a job interview sounds super scary. It does. I get it.
And so the takeaway I'm hearing is that the VR system, they don't, while they are focused on getting you a job, they don't just jump in at the point where you are ready to apply for a job. So to say I want to work is not the same thing as saying I know how to work or I know what I can do. It is saying I want to work. I want to be employed. Now help me get from wherever I am to that place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And that's their function. So we don't have
it
to be
is.
afraid of not knowing the answers to questions. It-
Correct. But I think instinctively, I think society has given us the message that we should know, but shoulding on yourself is not helpful in this case at
right,
all.
right, right. So once you're in the system, what are the kinds of resources that are available? What can somebody with a vision impairment, you said earlier, like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't even know what to ask for. What are the categories of things that should be considered when you are making those initial requests?
Well, my approach was then and still is talk to me about what you're trying to do, right? What was your biggest pain point today? I burned breakfast. Okay,
Okay.
let's talk about that. Or, I'm having this, whatever your just real time problems that need solved. because I think number one, it gives you people really feel some relief quickly if you solve the problem that's just right in front of us. And it's also just, it makes sense. It's the low hanging fruit. Um, and the universe of all the assistive technology and all of the training that's available is a lot of jargon and a lot of vocabulary words that are
Mm,
foreign to the average. If I got 10 neighbors out here and said, "Have you ever heard of these specialties?" They would all go, "What? No." So, how to keep the intimidation factor low and just let's start with relatable problems you need solved. I'm trying to do my online banking and now I can't see this fine print. This isn't working for me. And my bills are going unpaid, right? Sometimes that's the first thing,
mm.
out of a client's mouth. And while helping someone pay their bills online doesn't seem like it's directly related to employment, homelessness does not facilitate the stability that is required for employment either.
Right. And making that point is part of self-advocacy. Is to say, yeah, this
Yes,
this is impacting my employability because my life is unstable, and we got to stabilize things before we're even talking about job interviews, much less maintaining a job.
correct.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So
Correct.
so life skills and kind of those really fundamental ways to adapt to vision loss and just keeping the boat afloat is an early stage and a crucially important stage that VR can help with. Once those are, I guess that's never entirely completed. It's not really about a destination. It's more about a journey, I suppose. But once you have enough stability to start looking to the next phase, what's VR's role there?
Well, so there's a written plan. It's called a individualized plan for employment, which is I'll just call a work plan because it's one less acronym. Um, the work plan that you and your vocational rehab counselor craft together is the written document. It's kind of the roadmap. It's a legally binding contract for what services they'll provide and how many and how often and so what goes on that plan, right? It determines how your preparation will look. Um, there's, I should say, a huge disparity in understanding of what can go on the plan, um, and clients again are not going to have an idea right out of the bat, showing up. But the basics, things that terms of art that you would probably want to know to consider. Am I ready for that? Um, your world gets really small when your vision changes and things feel unsafe. And so a lot of withdrawing, social isolation is partly due to lack of transportation. And so orientation and mobility training is right the type of vision rehabilitation specialty that sends somebody to your house or brings you to a training center and helps you learn right orientation, white cane travel skills, route planning, how to get from point A to point B as a non-driver, and all of the things that go with it. In this day and age, there's so many apps and technology. I mean, things coming out every single day that make that easier, but the core skills are the same.
Mhm.
And so, getting right, rather, a lot of people, as I meet them in the counseling arena now, have one of their biggest frustrations and loss of independence issues is I don't get to go anywhere alone anymore
Right.
because I don't have right the comfort level. It's dangerous, it's scary, and of course it is. So that's usually right. Have you right had any orientation and mobility training? Is my next question. They, you know, are silent, and then I back up with somebody with a white cane who could teach you a little bit about how to use it, right, and take you out, give you an opportunity to get comfortable with curb cuts, right, get comfortable with street crossings, how to find your way in a grocery store that's unfamiliar or the one that you've always shopped at, either one. Right? Just getting, you know, the confidence, right? The hard skills, but also
Right.
the emotional confidence to re-engage. And so
Right.
that's
Yeah.
that's usually a first order of business and some technology training because digital, anxiety is a huge factor now. If you can't make your phone, or your or computer help you access the world, you're not, you will be isolated, right? You're not going to be able to access the help you need.
So we've got life skills, we've got orientation and mobility, which I guess would fall into sort of more of that independence
Mhm.
framework. And then the technology, which is, I guess, really all of this is about independence so far. I'm realizing that as I say it. But the technology is also about, getting communication in and out, and understanding how to connect with the world, and even figuring out what opportunities are available from an employment standpoint. But those skills are broader than employment. Like all of these skills are usable in the realm of getting employment, but they're also applicable in much broader areas to make life better. So it's not, while VR's goal is employment, the skills you can get from VR can be applied in lots of other ways as well. It's kind of, I hadn't thought about it in those terms before.
Instrumental activities of daily living is kind of the jargon there,
Uh
right?
huh.
Stuff you need to be able to do to keep, the lights on at home and function. Um, and so, right, cooking, um, being able to manage your own medicine, being able to, handle your own household, cleaning, laundry, getting, groceries in. Those are things that sort of fall under a different specialty. Vision rehabilitation therapists, right? VRTs,
Hmm.
certified vision rehab therapists, are typically the instructors that bring that skill set. And I think right away, anyone listening to this has caught on. You mean I need three different specialists to teach me the basic things and that's right. What's wrong with this picture? And I think that's part of the point to make. It's overwhelming. Just
Right.
there's so much to learn, and the instructors don't get one person who comes to the door and rolls out 10 hours, 15 hours of training, and then you leave fully equipped. It's not that simple.
So you have to learn the system that teaches you how to navigate a different system. But you have to start somewhere. And to your
Right.
point, the starting is with the self-advocacy and saying, "Hey, I need some help," and that takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to do, just to
It
pick up the
does,
phone the first time.
and it often requires somebody to be the sighted assistance to find a
Hmm.
government agency phone number or address or email, right? That's um, this. I've often had people say to me that this is a hidden program. Um, how come I'd never heard of this? I'd never heard of you guys. Um, I waited for years on sort of on my couch. I
Mm.
didn't even know who to call. And I think this is part of the problem, right? Because it's not part of the medical system that of, people that diagnosed you, right? And so, but the time between diagnosis and referral to vision rehabilitation and intervention, right, getting some real help will have a lot to do with how you fare mental health wise in that time frame. And so, recognizing that the people in the white coats, the doctors who are trained to treat and cure eye disease, when they've reached the end of what they can do, they don't actually, there is no bridge that takes the patient straight over into the world of vision rehabilitation and a warm handoff to all these specialties that we're talking about here. Um, that's so it is in some respects a hidden program, hidden specialty, because people, how would they even know where to look for it?
Yeah, most people have never heard of VR until their life changes dramatically and they need it. But it's, yeah,
And that may take a minute.
of course, yeah. You mentioned the emotional impact, and I know that's a lot of what you do as a contractor with the vocational rehabilitation service or the agency. And can I take that to mean that one of the things that you can ask for as a client of VR is some mental health help if that's impacting your employment prospects?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. You can get a line item for a service and a dollar amount, certain number of units that cover the cost of adjustment counseling for blindness. I think every state frames this a little differently. Georgia's policy technically right now says that adjustment counseling for blindness is a last resort service, which I fundamentally disagree with. that when other services and other learning are not happening as expected, that you then look at why, and then there's counseling available. Um, I mean, everything we know about the social trauma, right, and the physical trauma that is being told, right, that you're going to lose your eyesight tells me that mental health support on the front end would be really advantageous for anyone, right, with this kind of, really shocking new information to digest. Um, but other states, do it a little bit differently. Um, and there's not a whole lot of mental health counselors that work in this space who know blindness and who, right, are um, CRCs or LPCs, licensed professional counselors or certified rehabilitation counselors. And so while you can ask for it, again, subject to availability, is probably often, there will not be resources.
That's the rules of the road, subject to availability, which is unfortunate. And that's part of self advocacy as well, is talking to the powers that be at both the federal and the state level and saying, hey, this is under resourced. Let's fix it. Um, that's hard to do when you're in the middle of crisis. But for those that are listening that have maybe been through it, I would encourage some advocacy on that front, is to increase the resources. Do you have any thoughts on, from a broader social landscape and political landscape, like what the advantages to having a VR system and a robust VR system are? Why is it good for us as a whole?
Well, financial self sufficiency is, I mean, good for everybody, right? People want to be tax paying citizens. The self worth and the self esteem that comes from, you know, contributing and being, right, valued as an employee in whatever world, or small business owner in whatever field you find yourself in. Being a parent who's got the ability to be an earner, right,
Mm,
makes the children that much better off down the line. Access to health care, right? While a lot of folks will get Medicare if they get Social Security disability, that takes 24 months to kick in typically. And that's from the time you've got approved for Social Security disability, which is often a long journey with a lot of waiting. And, if you could find yourself employment that has health insurance attached to it, right, that's your non-ocular health conditions and your ocular health conditions are going to get
right.
better attention sooner. So it's a rising tide that lifts all boats.
Yeah,
But it is complicated. I acknowledge that there's a lot of steps to making it work.
for sure. Yeah. So we've covered the basic life skills, the activities of daily living. We've talked about orientation and mobility. We've talked about technology. What happened where, when we get to the point of saying, okay, we've got all these things reasonably well in hand, now let's talk about an actual job. What is that? Paint a picture for what that process is like. And I know it's different for everybody, but maybe in broad strokes.
There's so much there.
Yeah.
So well, I'll share another bit of jargon so that this is something you can ask for on your plan, right?
Mm.
A comprehensive vocational evaluation is a very specialized kind of assessment of your strengths and your skills and your abilities. And that is something that vocational rehab can hire somebody to offer you and spend some time with you. There are people who offer it in Braille if you're a Braille reader. There are people who offer it, right, use the McCarran dial or other devices that are normed on people with vision loss. Um, if you're not sure what you want to be when you grow up and you're asking vocational rehab to
Even
help
if you
you.
are grown up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm 53. I'm still not sure. It's it's a tool, right? And I think knowing that a vocational evaluation is available might be something people weren't aware of. So there's that, trial work experiences, and frankly, a lot of those of us who work in Georgia in this area tend to spend a lot of time encouraging people to take stepping stone jobs, whether that's volunteer work at organization that's near and dear to your heart, or the library down the street. I think the idea that you're going to go from 0 to 60, from having been traumatized, newly blind, and unemployed for however many years, to being a 40-hour a week employee, is ridiculous in most people's case, right? They're going to need to switch fields often, be retrained, learn a whole lot of new things. I think just the like, can I, mobilize to get out 3 days a week, for a 9 to 3 commitment at the local, whatever, I'll just pick a animal shelter for lack of better things, right? To be
Okay.
at the front desk and to greet people. I think part of that is the rebuilding confidence. And so this is the mental health piece as opposed to the hard skills, right? You need to believe that you can do it
Hmm.
before you try to go out there and sell yourself to employers. And so that builds over time. That's not going to happen once and done. You're going to need to have a series of, experiences. I have to figure out how to get there, right? I have to navigate these transportation challenges. Am I using rideshare? Can I get this app on my phone? Can I figure out how to connect it to my credit card? Does it work? When I get the rideshare driver to show up, do they, can I even connect with the car that I can't see?
Right.
Um, like, I think the fear of, oh my, that's just overwhelming will keep people on the sidelines. And so they need to have some experiences over time while they still have the support of this whole team of instructors and someone like myself around them so that if something goes sideways, it's not, game over.
Right. It's not the end of the world, and it's not black and white. As you were describing that, I had a memory from my own life, and it kind of goes along with the honesty and the transparency you brought up with the subject to availability. Right. It's just that, like, let's be realistic. I'm remembering when I was diagnosed as a kid. I look back and I'm grateful that that my parents never said, "Oh, you can do anything." Right. I can't be a commercial pilot and be legally blind at the same time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
There are things I can't do. And I think it's very easy when you've been traumatized, which vision loss is very often traumatizing, uh, to go into black and white mode, where if you say, "Oh, there's some things I can't do," then there's nothing I can do. And I'm hearing you say that it's a process to start saying, it's okay that there's a list of things that are unavailable to me, but even though I don't know what's on that list, there is a list of things that are available to me. And I can ask for the help to try and figure out what those things are. And I may really enjoy some of those things. Like, ideally, we want to help people get jobs that they like, that are very fulfilling, even if
Yes.
it's not what they've dreamed of since they were a child. If they, had normal vision as a child, maybe there are some things that are unavailable, but that doesn't mean they can't have a rich, fulfilling, enjoyable vocation and career.
And first, we've got to conquer some fears to get out there. You
Right.
know, that's the I think of it like an on ramp on an interstate, right? We got to do this. There's a gradual acceleration lane or a
Yeah.
deceleration lane when you're coming off for a reason because you can't go right. You know, in Atlanta, right? On
Hmm.
285, if all the cars are going 85 miles an hour, you don't come out right going that fast. It's just it takes as long as it takes, and that's part of recognizing there's anxiety, there's depression, right? And those things can become emotional barriers. So, to use the example of if you had a big disappointment or an embarrassing situation, for example, right? Where you're like, I can't believe I did that, or I can't believe that guy didn't come to my door. He said he came and I never knew he was there and then he left and now I'm late for, my commitment.
Right.
Right. I think a lot of people fear that they won't be able to keep up their end of the bargain with time sensitive commitments. I hear that a lot with clients. I can't go to work because I can't guarantee I'll be there on time. Okay, so that's a fear, and that's realistic. What can we, right? What are the choices here? What can we do to address that? And it have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, and the ride shares not all three,
Mm.
potentially, but being able to go through those experiences in low stakes employment, like volunteer roles where you're unpaid, and get some confidence under your belt and have a few wins and have some learning curve, some experiences that didn't go as expected that we then, didn't repeat, right? We recognized, oh, here's what I did there, here's what didn't work. Okay, let me do it differently next. And that all is part of the exploration process of finding, getting out of your comfort zone as a job seeker with less vision. And it's also precursor stuff to the what do I want to do when I grow up? Can I just get there on time and get my way to the office building is a big logistical question that
Haunting.
needs answered.
Right, right. Yeah, the confidence you're speaking of is not confidence that everything's going to go right. It's confidence that you can handle it when things go wrong.
Bingo. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I would also say that society has not prepared us well for this kind of ongoing problem solving. And it feels unfair. And shutting down or getting angry or both very often are the emotional response when a couple of these things don't go as expected in a row, um, right? And how do we, what's the resilience factor? How do we build in more protective factors so that people don't crash or go off an emotional cliff when one of these things doesn't go as expected,
Yeah.
and believe that just because it happened this time doesn't mean it's going to happen again because I'm going to do something differently. That's what I'm
Right. I'm
planning.
going to learn from this.
Hmm.
Yeah. And perhaps gain a new skill. Um, Once somebody's in a job, you were talking about resilience to disappointment or mistakes. I'm wondering about like how does the VR system view and help with fits that maybe aren't going well or just aren't right, or if something is disappointing, how does VR get involved and try and turn something negative into something more positive?
I'm not sure that they're well suited for that type of intervention,
Mhm.
in my experience. And I don't pretend to know how it works, in the rest of the country, but um, that is typically not going to be your VR counselor. It's going to be somebody who has more, right? Maybe a certified vision rehabilitation therapist or a technology instructor. Because often what is not working well is the company that you hired on with now has some proprietary software system that doesn't work with JAWS,
Mhm.
right? That one happens a lot.
The screen reader
No,
software, just for clarity.
yes. So
Yeah.
your screen reader software, which you're very proficient at now, after VR is funded, whatever, 18 months of training, you get hired, and nobody, at this big enterprise organization has ever used JAWS. So they don't know if the screen reading software is actually compatible. And now you're 6, 8 weeks into your employment and you're realizing the problem, right? And it's this deep terror for you as the new employee who's really trying, to show up, be capable, put your best foot forward. Um, so that often is, reaching back out to the person who did your technology training or get some task analysis from a vocational contractor who teaches
Mhm.
rehab, therapy to go in and figure out, okay, what are the tasks associated with this aspect of your job? How do we break them down and get somebody in here to train you, to teach you on the ones that are not going smoothly for you? And right, but I think there's also a real embarrassment at needing that kind of assistance on the job that can be a barrier for the new hire, right? Who just wants to fit in and blend in and not be
Sure.
singled out as needing all this gadgets and gizmos and tech staff. I mean, no one wants to show up with an entourage at their new job. Um,
What do you say to that person who's feeling
you've
that
got
way?
you've got choices, right? Let's talk about your choices. I think if they feel more in control of the choice, whether it's I'm just going to quit, never mind, this is too much, I can't be bothered, this was a mistake, right? Yeah, absolutely. One of your choices is to resign, right? Or what else? What other choices, right? What kind of accommodations can we ask for? What kind of additional training and expertise, right, might we bring in? And other things we haven't thought of yet, right? Are you a meta glasses user? Is this something, that we can get your meta glasses involved with?
Right.
There's a lot of ways, but I think when you're in the panic of, oh my God, I'm not going to succeed at this, right? The constriction in your body and in your stomach, all of just the fight or flight response that kicks into gear makes access to rational thought and that methodical problem solving out of reach because you're in the, oh my God, this isn't going to work. I've worked so hard. I finally got the offer. I finally got, and now, I'm stuck around this, right? Unforeseeable problem. And so I think just having, sounding board of somebody who understands, supports you unconditionally. I don't have any opinion on whether you should stay in this job or go to HR and say, move me please, or do another thing. It doesn't, but you've got choices, and so let's not, right? Two, don't react quite yet. Let's respond.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Don't react, respond. Yeah. And one thing we haven't talked about today, and it's not the topic for today, but one of the things that people have in their corner is the Americans with Disabilities Act. They're not alone. There are some legal obligations that certain employers have, and they are fuzzy. And I'm sure we'll do an episode on that to understand that better. But we have, as a society, said that public spaces should be accessible for the people with disabilities, and we require that to one degree or another in different situations and in different contexts. It gets complicated, but you're not alone in that sense. Our society has said you deserve it. You deserve something. So you're not all by yourself in that. If you are feeling demoralized or scared, it's a very reasonable thing to be feeling. It's a hard thing you're going through. So, yeah. Is there anything else we haven't covered that you feel like is important for people who are navigating the vocational rehabilitation system to know?
I think the main thing is asking for what you need is highly correlated to the likelihood that you'll get it.
Mm,
And so even if you've heard, whatever bad outcomes, dismal, stories from other people in your same community, or people who've, got your same set of circumstances, very often, right, how you show up is the one thing you can control
mm,
in the vocational rehabilitation process. And so asking, for what you need, how you ask, and what the substance of that request is, and considering this a marathon, not a sprint.
yeah.
Right? Stick with your ask. If you're not being heard, right? How do you refine your question, right? It doesn't need to escalate it to somebody's supervisor, in a huff necessarily. It's just, right? If the phone calls aren't getting it, all right, what else can we try? It's the problem solving skill set, and how to have the stamina to stay the course with that and keep showing up for it, keep asking for what you need. I think is it's the secret sauce, if there is one, um, and believing in the fact that, right, I can be proud of the fact that I'm self-advocating. I'm not being a pest, right? This is what it takes, and you're showing up for yourself. So keep with it.
That's great. Well, thank you for helping the people, the audience listening to this, understand a little more so that they don't have that I don't know what I don't know quandary. The more we learn, the more we can advocate for ourselves. It's very difficult to ask for something that we don't know exists. So thanks for helping fill in some of those gaps. I really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Glad to. Thanks for doing this.
Of course. All right. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
All right. Take good care.
It's refreshing and impactful to hear such a transparent and realistic perspective on navigating what can often be a difficult system when you're trying to get the resources you need for a stable and enjoyable career. My thanks to Janice for the work she does and for offering her insight today. You can find Janice online at adjustingtovisionloss.com. If you'd like to get in touch with your state's vocational rehabilitation agency, you can start by visiting the website for the Rehabilitation Services Administration at rsa.ed.gov. On their homepage, you'll find a link to a list of all the VR agencies nationwide. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Insight Out. You're the reason this podcast exists, and we'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a voice message at speakpipe.com/insideoutpod. That's speakpipe.com/insightoutpod. INSIGHTOUTPOD. There, you can share your thoughts about today's conversation, suggest a topic for a future episode, or tell us about your experience living with vision loss. Again, that's speakpipe.com/insightoutpod. Insight Out is produced by Integral Mental Health Services, my private practice in Atlanta, Georgia, that offers psychotherapy for adults in Georgia and chronic illness and disability counseling nationwide. Visit us at integralmhs.com. And you can visit insideoutpod.com to catch up on all the episodes. You can also find us on social media using the handle @InsideOutPod. I hope you'll join me for the next episode of Inside Out. Subscribe now in your favorite podcast app to stay connected. Thanks again for listening.